Welcome to Oklahoma Gardening. On today's episode, we visit greenhouses that provide plants for the beautiful gardens on the OSU-Stillwater campus. Host Casey Hentges is joined by Dave Edwards to create decorative garden spheres out of concrete. And we travel to Lane, Oklahoma to visit with Southeast Area Horticulture Specialist Jim Shrefler about some research he is doing with cool season vegetables grown in high tunnels. Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance is provided by TLC, Oklahoma's leading garden center, Southwood Landscape and Nursery, Tulsa's source for great gardens, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing.
We are here at Oklahoma State University's facility greenhouses because I wanted to show you something that's happening behind the scenes as the campus gets ready for spring. Holly Pasmore is joining us, and you are the greenhouse coordinator and responsible for getting all of the annual plants ready to go out on campus. Can you tell us a little bit about the timeline and what it takes to get these plants ready for this spring?
Well, the process starts in June, and we decide on a color scheme, and then we decide on the plants.
Okay.
And then we get them in and bump them up, and then they're ready to go out in May.
So when you say you get them in, how do they come in looking like this? What size are they when they come in?
They come in a 288 plug size, which is really small.
And then at that point, you mentioned you bump them up. So you've got them in about 4.5-inch containers here, some in different sizes. How do you decide which size container you're going to put them in?
The more aggressive plants will bump up into a 6-inch pot. This stuff that will hold a little bit longer, we put those in the 4.5-inch.
Okay, so you don't plant those in the large pots right away, so you don't lose the plug in such a large amount of soil, right? Because it could potentially rot a little bit. You
Yes.
slowly bring them up into that bigger size pot.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a lot of tags in all of these. They look like they're going to go to a retail nursery. Can you explain to me why you put tags in every single one of these pots if they're just going to go out into your containers out on campus?
Well, a lot of the plants that we get in are patented. When you have a patented plant, you have to buy the tag with it.
Okay, so it's kind of labeling it that you haven't illegally taken cuttings of it or anything. You've paid for the royalties of these plants to have them.
Yes.
All right. And some of them also have actual containers that they come with. So we know again that this is a particular branded plant, and it is what you ordered, that you are getting the right plant that you ordered.
Right.
Excellent. So, looking around here, you've got some sticky cards. Can you tell us a little bit about what you have to be aware of as far as insects and what you do to scout those insects?
The cards are a good starting point. Any greenhouse needs a good scouting program, and your main pests are your thrips, your spider mites, and your aphids, and anything else that happens to crop up. But if you're not scouting your plants, you don't know what's there.
Okay.
So the cards are a good area if you notice something on there. Okay, well, I need to scout this area more aggressively next time.
So that's just kind of a general indicator, but you still are out here every day looking through the plants with your eyes and checking them. And what sort of treatments do you use Are they biological treatments that you use if you find some white flies or thrips?
Most of them are biological. Sometimes we have to go a little bit heavier.
Okay, all right. And you've got a couple of sweet potato vines that are out from the main group. Why are these setting aside here?
Well, those have spider mites on them.
So again, you know, even as professionals, we have to deal with insects, and one of the best things to do is kind of quarantine some of those plants and pull them out from the bigger herd so that we don't infect all of those plants, correct?
Right.
Okay, great. So Holly, you have 4 greenhouses that you are coordinating here, and we're in a different one, and there's a lot of perennials growing in this greenhouse. Why do you grow perennials in one house and your annuals in a different house?
The perennial house stays cooler, and it runs about 40 at night.
Okay.
And that's just to hold the perennials so they don't come out of dormancy.
Okay, and we've got fans throughout all of these greenhouses. Can you tell us why we have those fans, and some are on, some are off?
It's more airflow.
Okay.
So we don't get diseases and botrytis and issues like that to come up.
So that's part of the health of the plant.
Yes.
Okay, and we're walking towards something that's kind of interesting over here in the back of the greenhouse. This is where you actually house these topiaries all winter long.
Yes.
And you're working on propagating some additional plants to fill in so that it'll look its best this spring. Can you tell us a little bit, do you take cuttings off of this, or how do you get those cuttings?
Yes, we've been taking cuttings off of the fig and some off the basket grass, and then we will, when they're rooted out, then we'll stick them into the boot.
Excellent. So when will this be going out on campus?
Probably right before graduation.
Okay, so this goes out before graduation, and you mentioned when do the plants, the annuals, go out on campus?
The annuals usually go out right after graduation because we want everything looking really well for graduation instead of looking like we just planted plants.
So you hold your winter spring plantings a little bit longer. So y'all aren't as antsy to get out on April 15th and start planting. You've got a little bit of time then.
Yes, because
right.
it never fails that it's going to freeze after April 15th.
Sometimes. We're in Oklahoma. All right, thank you, Holly, for joining us today.
Thanks.
We are joined by Dave Edwards, retired division head for OSU-OKC's Agriculture Technology Division. And Dave, you've got another project for us. We are going to build some lawn ornaments out of glass balls.
Yes, we're going to cast some concrete globes, and they can be a lot of fun for use out in the garden. They can be used a lot of different ways. We've already prepared one in a sand box. The reason we put it in this sand is to obviously support the globe. When we start filling this with concrete, we don't want it rolling around. But more importantly, the sand is going to support the globe. We're filling this with a wet cement mix, and there's a lot of weight added to that, and especially if we use a lighter weight or a thinner glass globe, it could easily blow that out while we're getting this prepared.
Okay, so after we've got this in the sand, what are we going to do?
Okay.
Do we just put the concrete right in there? Or?
There's one step that we have to do first.
Okay.
And probably have this in the kitchen pantry. The PAM or any of the vegetable oils, we're going to spray a light coat of this inside, and that's going to serve as a bond breaker. Otherwise, that wet cement, when it hardens, it's going to stick to the inside of that glass, and we want it to release and have a nice clean surface on the ball. So I'm just going to give this a light coating.
So this will just help the glass break away from that, correct?
Keep the concrete from sticking to the glass.
Okay, so you just gave it a light spray?
And we're ready to go. And we're going to use a ready mix that, again, can be picked up at any of the home centers. And what we're going to be using is a cement, sand, and gravel mix. All we have to do is add water. The cement that, the ready mix cement that we're going to use is an 80-pound bag.
So how many balls can you make with 80 pounds?
If we use an 8-inch globe like this, that ought to yield enough material to do 4 globes. Be a little bit left over, but it's way better when you're working with concrete to have a little extra than to come up a little bit short.
Okay, so we don't need a whole sack just for the one we're doing today.
That's right. We already have an open bag that we used for a previous project, so we're going to use some of this same material for this one globe. Now, the setting up in the pan, like we've shown here, works for one globe, but if you're going to do a gang molding, take a pan this size or big enough to hold 2, 3, 4, 5, half a dozen, big enough to sand them in. That's what I typically do, is gang cast several balls at a time. But for the homeowner that's just doing this as a little fun project, one at a time is easy to do.
Okay, perfect. So let's mix some Quikrete then.
Okay, this in here. Again, this is an open bag. And we're just going to put enough in here to do this one casting. Don't breathe the dust. How long can you hold your breath?
Still holding.
Okay, that feels like about half of what we had. I'm going to set this aside. And it looks like we had some large pieces, so let's just get those out of there. Okay, now to mix our water, I want to have a little base right there in the center.
So make a little reservoir.
You want to pour or you want me to?
I'll let you do it.
Okay, we're going for a target amount. We don't want too much water.
Okay.
Our paste would be too thin.
So it's kind of like making pie dough, right?
Yep, just the right amount of ingredients. And that gets me started. I'm going to make another little basin. I'm going to pour some more
You
water.
want me to pour a little more?
But I want just enough, just enough, just enough, and then there's a point where that's good right now. And we'll add a little bit more. It's much better to add your water a little bit at a time, because I can always add more. I just can't take it back out. I want to make sure everything's blended very well. Gets a little thick and heavy. Casey, do you have your gloves on?
Got them on.
Okay, we want to be safe, because one of the things about working with cement is caustic. And if you've ever
I have.
worked with this,
Not a good thing.
and then later in the day your hands are all dry and
Yes.
cracked and you feel like you've burned off your fingertips, fingerprints, that can all be avoided with working with gloves. Okay, so what do you think about that?
Looks good. Not good enough to eat like oatmeal, but
I think I'll pass as well. But I think we're about the right consistency. It's good enough for us to get started, so just going to get enough on my trowel to fit in the neck of the globe. And we'll get a few scoops in there. And one thing we want to avoid is those bubbles or voids that would happen on the very outside of the concrete or in the inside face of the globe.
doesn't look like you can get it with the trowel too well.
No, I'm going to let you use this, I'm going to have you use this little stick. It's going to be the equivalent of a vibrating tool for traditional concrete. And if you'll just move that around to where that stiff mix contacts the inside face of the bowl and gets kind of puddles, gets kind of loose. That's it. And we'll get some solids and probably scrape off. I'm going to overfill and then scrape off some of the wet paste. Okay, I'm going to go back in. So that's nice and wet, nice and loose. And I'm going to gradually bring this out because I don't want to leave a void where the stick comes out.
So if I did want a round ball, then I would scrape some of that off.
I'd scrape off some of that free water right now and get down to the thicker mix, and then still have it above the round bottom. And then when we break this out and the cast is finished, when it sets up and we remove the glass, we would grind off or rub off those shoulders, so
Okay.
it'll be round on the bottom.
Okay, excellent. So what do we do after this step? We've filled it with concrete, and is it ready tomorrow?
No, this is the waiting part.
Okay.
One of the things about working with concrete, your cement needs a curing period, and the water that we added to this is critical because that starts the chemical process. It's not physical, it doesn't dry out to harden, it actually grows crystals. So that's the hardening of the concrete, and for that to occur properly, we want to allow 5 to 7 days.
Okay.
So we're going to leave everything just like it is. I'm going to do one more thing because if we're going to leave this base, we want to make sure that the base of this is actually level. So here's our last little test. Just eyeball, it looks pretty good. And right there looks good, and right there looks very good. If it was just a little bit out of plumb, after this sets up and hardens, and if the neck was a little bit off, then when we break off the globe, the base of it's going to be tilting
Crooked.
just a little bit.
Okay.
But we're good. You did very well on setting this up in the sand, so
And
we're good to go.
If it was crooked, we could just slightly rotate it in the sand
Yes, this
mixture.
is like a ball and socket in the sand, and we could very slightly rotate it to get that rim just to plumb.
Okay, so in the next few days, this water is going to change. Do we need to keep water on it as it's curing?
Yes.
Okay.
What's going to happen now, again, this is going to set or harden over the next 5 to 7 days as it cures. It's going to reach that strength where we can bust off that ball without breaking up or crumbling the concrete. So this time next week, we can break off the glass globe, and still we want to allow another few weeks, to 28 days is ideal to reach the maximum strength, but we'll be about half strength after 5 to 7 days.
Okay, excellent.
Next week, we'll finish off our concrete spheres. But if you really can't wait that long, you can stop by our Facebook page right now to see the final steps of the project.
It's so rewarding when you're peeling.
Today we're here at the Wes Watkins Research and Extension Center in Lane, Oklahoma, and joining me today is the Southeast Area Horticulture Specialist, Jim Shrefler. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for coming to visit us.
So we came down because you're doing some research here on organic cool season crops, and they're in high tunnels. Why are you doing research in high tunnels versus just out on the ground?
Right now there's over 300 high tunnels in the state being used by different growers. And 8 years ago it was maybe a dozen and a half or so. So there's a lot of interest in that area. And growers need information, to know what crops to produce, how to grow in these tunnels. So that's the reason to be doing this research.
Because the environmental conditions are different.
Right, yes,
Obviously, you're changing the environment growing in a high tunnel versus out and exposed to the climate.
Right.
So.
And growers can grow good quality crops 12 months out of the year using these high tunnels here in Oklahoma, especially in southern Oklahoma.
And to establish organic research land, what all is involved to be certified organic? There's a lot to that, and it's a multi-year process. So you definitely want to maintain organic lab once you establish.
Yeah, it's typically a 3-year process from when you begin to apply to be certified organic, and you have to follow all the organic guidelines as far as not using any unapproved chemicals and managing the soil properly, growing cover crops and things like that. So
excellent. So what are we looking at here, Jim?
Okay, what we have in here are about 30 different varieties of kales and mustards, and there's also a little bit of spinach, which was just started a little bit later, so it's pretty small still. And basically what we're doing here is we want to determine, using the hoop house production system, if there be any varieties that are particularly well suited to it, if there's any varieties that are not suited and won't grow well for one reason or another in the high tunnels here on the organic land.
Right, because it is getting warmer in here than outside, and so you've seen that some of them are starting to bolt versus the others that aren't yet.
Yes.
And we're just in one of your trials. You actually have 3 hoop houses total.
Right, there's 3 houses identical to this one with the same treatments in for the research purposes.
And you've randomly selected where you've put the different crops in each greenhouse?
Right, these have been located, all the different varieties have been randomly located within these beds.
And now we have 2 different sides here, and you've got 2 different treatments going on. Can you explain that?
Yeah. Part of this study is to compare the different varieties, but also we're doing that comparison using 2 different organic approved soil fertility management approaches. I think it's this bed here. We did a soil test. We determined what nutrients were needed, and then we used a manure-based product. It was a poultry-based product, manure product, to adjust the soil fertility, and then additional some bone meal and some other things to get it right where it was. In the other one, we didn't use the manure. We only used the other nutrient sources. And the reason for that is some growers, if you're growing greens crops, some growers may not want to run any risk of using a manure in there that could contaminate the crop with pathogens that could, be potentially harmful to the consumer.
Right, right. So you're kind of researching which one might be better, or if there's a significant difference between
to see
the
if
two.
it makes a difference.
Right. If somebody's interested in getting some more information right now, is there something that they could look at? Is there a website or a department that they could go to?
We had a previous study similar. We didn't have so many varieties in it, but with some of the different greens crops.
Jim, you mentioned that this is an organic research facility, and you haven't had too many insect problems, and you've treated your soil with organic fertilizers. What about the weed problems? How do you take care of that?
Okay, that's when you're growing organically. That is one of the big challenges that you're going to face, because many of the herbicides that vegetable growers would normally use cannot be used on the organic land. So we end up having to do a fair amount of land hand labor, such as hoeing, to keep the weeds controlled. But what's important is to get the proper tools that do the job most efficiently. And one of those tools that we've been using and found really good results with is this type of scuffle hoe, we call it. It's basically just a flat blade that you run it along the surface, and here we have some spinach that's kind of small. You can see the rows of it, but the weeds are getting started in there. And with this tool, you just very gently run it underneath, and you can even go underneath your drip irrigation without too much trouble to clean those weeds up. And that's all it takes. You don't need to do any chopping or digging deep, or those weeds are going to dry up just from cutting them off like that. So
you're just exposing their roots.
Right.
So Jim, in this greenhouse you have something else that you're growing. You've got onions. So
Right.
Tell us why you're growing onions here.
Okay. Here in Oklahoma, based on research done in the past, the best way to grow onions is by using transplants. And those, you'll see them in all the garden centers beginning in late January and throughout February.
Right.
And many people plant onions in their garden, and commercial growers too.
And you're talking about the bundles,
right?
Or they
Those
come in
bundles,
pots?
yeah,
right,
yeah.
Right.
So these are some of the same variety. This is the variety as candy, actually, but for an organic grower, they can't use those plants that are sold. They're not grown organically. They can't use those transplants if they're certified organic. That's one reason, and based on several other reasons, of just being able to grow plants of the variety that you want. If you can buy the seed but you can't buy the plants, it's a way to grow your own plants. Or if you just want to be sure that you have good quality plants, you can grow your own.
So when do you plant the seeds for onions?
Okay, we've done about 10 years of research on this, and basically anywhere from mid-October here in southern Oklahoma, mid-October until mid-November, you can plant those seeds in here and get them started, and they'll grow through the winter time, and the plants will be ready to transplant about the end of February.
Okay. And of course, you wouldn't want to continue growing these out because they're planted so densely, they wouldn't be able to develop a bulb. So
Right.
that's why we're talking specifically for harvesting them as transplants.
Right. These and here's some that I just pulled out yesterday of these same plants here. These can be spaced out at about 4 inches in the row in the garden and all that. And these plants, even though it's a little bit late, this variety is called Candy. It bulbs a little bit later than some of the other ones, though this still has good potential to make good 4-inch diameter bulbs for this year. In July they'd be ready.
And you've got these growing straight in sand here.
Right. This was a research project comparing some different types of growing medium, basically the field soil or sand or mixtures of sand and potting soils. Just trying to determine what would be the best approach to do it, and basically depending on the year, all the methods work. But one thing nice about the sand here, number one, if you get any weeds coming up, the weeds are easy to pull out. But once it's time to pull the plants to harvest them and transplant them, you can just grab onto them, and they pull right out of the ground like that. So nice clean roots. If they're growing in soil, you can't do that. It'll take more work to loosen that soil and get them off.
Right, an easy harvest. And you're supplementing them with some organic fertilizer, I would imagine.
Right, because sand does not have much nutrient, so we use something like a fish emulsion fertilizer. It's a complete organic fertilizer, and water them with that to get them started and growing. But it's pretty straightforward. And one of the big again, we've done this for a number of years. One of the big things was found that onions grown this way in hoop houses, they just don't tend to have much of a problem with bolting. And oftentimes the bulbs that you purchase in the garden center, you plant those in your garden, they start to grow, and some of them make bulbs, but some of them make seed stalks also, and that's not what you want. So,
Right.
so we don't have a problem with seed stalks in plants grown this way.
Okay.
So,
Great. Thank you, Jim.
thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Next week, we'll plant one of our unique raised beds. We'll look at a couple of closely related plants that between them can provide color in just about any location. We visit the Will Rogers Gardens in Oklahoma City, and Barbara Brown will prepare a tasty recipe. So join us next week for more TV You'll Grow to Love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We wish to thank our generous underwriters, TLC Garden Centers, Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is provided by Pond Pro Shops, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, and the Oklahoma Horticultural Society.